After yesterday's disastrous press conference, is it time to start talking about the 25th Amendment?
Ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, welcome to the Conservative Circus with James T. Harris.
It was so crazy that we had a special counsel say that the president was really not fit to serve. And I'm wondering, is it time to talk about the 25th Amendment? And the reason why I'm asking is because there was a time when they absolutely flooded President Trump with the accusation.
Vice President Pence should invoke the 25th Amendment, assume presidential duties until the inauguration next week, and save us from a president who is unable to function, unable to protect our country. I urge all, including my Republican colleagues, to put politics aside. Act to secure the safety of our country.
The 25th Amendment.
Oh, yeah, act to save our country. We have to find Donald Trump incompetent just because they didn't want him to finish out his term after he was already defeated in the 2020 elections. President Biden addressed the nation last night and said his memory is fine, and he defended his reelection campaign, saying he's the most qualified person. But that report that came out, it was a true bombshell. Dr. Zuhdi Jasser is a former lieutenant commander in the United States Navy. He's the past president of the Arizona Medical Association, and he is also the founder of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy. He is in the center ring. And Dr. Jasser, my first question is, as a former Navy official, a world traveler, are you aware that Mexico is on the border of the Gaza Strip?
Absolutely not. And as horrific as that flub was, it actually, I'll tell you, as a doctor, I love my patients. I have nothing more dear than the doctor-patient covenant and those patients that have memory issues, and so many families deal with it. But let me tell you also, as a doctor, do you know that there's laws that say that if I, as a physician, see another physician who's impaired, or a hospital sees doctors that are impaired, we have a duty to report, because we have a obligation to protect other patients. So if there's an Arizona law, if there's a lot of states that have laws that we have a duty to report physicians that are impaired because they could, behind the scenes in the OR, injure their patients because of problems. If the doctor comes out to the waiting room and says, "Oh, I talked to my colleague C. Everett Koop or Benjamin Rush from 100 years ago," I mean, that then should be a sign that we need to do something about that. And we have a moral and ethical obligation to report. And the White House has turned into basically a memory care center. I mean, it is really unethical, and we have the toughest job in the world. And I also, as a Navy doc, used to qualify folks, pilots and others, for ability to deploy. And we have a commander-in-chief who's coming out in the few moments we see him making mistaking current presidents for presidents that were heads of Kohl, that was the head of Germany 20, 30 years ago, Mitterrand, and confusing states of Mexico versus Egypt. I mean, these are things that are telltale signs of somebody that has competency issues. And to say that our country isn't weakened, isn't at stake, and that the people around him are not morally obligated to protect us is just beyond the pale.
Dr. Jasser, I know you have not personally examined President Biden, but as you just said, you're a trained observer. Would you say that the president is fit for office?
I certainly think there's enough question there that we, as the president's patients, should be concerned that our doctor is incompetent, has capacity issues, and doesn't have competency. And I'll tell you, look at it. You see, I don't need to examine him to see cognitive issues regarding confabulations, forgetting historical narratives, making up new narratives, having a blank facies, a stiffened gait, things that are classic of somebody who's having some mental decompensation. And listen, how many families talk and want to protect their loved one, whether they're a doctor or whatever, from harming themselves, getting in a car and driving, and yet we are the emperor's walking down the street without clothes, and he's careening naked into various press conferences. Yes. and nobody seems to be doing anything about it.
We have Dr. Zuhdi Jasser in the center ring. He is a former lieutenant commander in the United States Navy. He is also a vocal foe of radical Islam, and he's a congressional candidate right now in, I think it's District 7. I got a really important question for you because President Biden was not coherent about much last night, but he seemed crystal clear about his support for Hamas when he said Israel's response has been over the top. What did you make of that?
I have to tell you, this is where the competency comes to bear, and where our allies, our strongest ally in the world, Israel, is fighting, and not only an existential war, a war for their existence, where their border with Gaza, they invaded them on October 7th, committed horrific acts of terror, and they will not be safe until Hamas is decimated and destroyed militarily, their government and others. And Hamas has not surrendered. They will not put down their weapons. They will not submit themselves to the courts and adjudication of the Israeli military and government. So therefore, the war is just. And yet, President Biden, with the teleprompter he's reading, it can't even get the location right, and somehow we're supposed to be their ally. We are so much missing in action. It tells you why Iran is attacking our sailors, why Iran is moving with other terror groups, and the Middle East is more unstable than it's ever been, because America, as a commander-in-chief, that is completely out to lunch.
Dr. Jasser, I haven't had you on since the disastrous border plan was rolled out by our very own Senator Sinema. Your opponent, Greg Stanton, has been championing it, correct? What's your stand on it?
Yeah, I think the voters in CD4 should make it clear that Greg Stanton is a rubber stamp for Biden. This was no border plan. This was amnesty on steroids. I mean, if you look at it, and by the way, the fact that Sinema is an independent should basically tell you that that's a sham. I mean, she basically endorsed a plan that continued to insult our intelligence by saying, oh, there'd be no limit until you got to 5,000 a day. Sanctuary cities were funded. It was basically a handout to millions of folks that are in here illegally, and tells our families that are seeing drugs, that are seeing crime increase across only 200 miles from the border is our district in Tempe and Mesa, and basically we're being told not to care about that, but just fund the migrants rather than actually putting the laws back in place, sealing the border, and protecting Arizona from further infringement of our citizens' rights in exchange for foreigners' rights, which is the end of national sovereignty. And basically, Greg Stanton seems to care more about foreign interests than our own interests here in district and in Arizona.
That seems to be a Democrat problem. Dr. Jasser, if people want to find out more about you and your campaign, where can they go?
Please come to Z4AZ.com, Z4AZ.com. Help us flip the seat, because we can win this. We need volunteers and all the support we can have.
Dr. Jasser, I want to thank you very much for your time this morning and for your insights into these issues.